What do you think makes you important? A question just for some food for thought as we touch upon VR, discipline, pontification of our generation, amongst other things. As always, remember to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to this podcasts. And let's get back into it. So, hey, everyone, before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about something important, our eyes, and specifically the hidden danger they face every day in the form of blue light. From our phones and laptops to tablets and TVs, we're constantly bombarded with blue light emissions. Now, while some blue light is natural and essential, the extensive amounts we're exposed to can wreak havoc on our sleep, focus, and even long-term health. Think interrupted sleep, digital eye strain, and headaches. Not exactly the recipe for productive and healthy life. But there's good news. Today's sponsor, Spectra 479 blue light glasses, offer a simple and stylish solution to protect your eyes from the harmful effect of blue light. Their glasses use innovative lens technology to filter out harmful blue light rays while still allowing beneficial light to pass through. Plus, they come in a variety of sleek and stylish designs, so you can look good while you protect your eyes. And guess what? Just for our awesome listeners, Spectra is offering a special discount code. Use the code CCPOD at checkout to get 15% off your entire purchase. Let's get back into the podcast.
Distancing myself from anything that seems cynic. I evicted all my demons, I ain't seen them in a minute. Phone on D in the event they try and kick it. I ain't messing with a pessimist, I get that noise and flip it. Keeping up composure cause it's crucial. Tossing everything away unless that thing is useful. Pocket watching people, all these people getting used to it. Bumping blues and burning all my blues over my Bluetooth. What you doing?
So yeah, we're your hosts, Kayende.
Pablo on the line.
And yeah, let's just start shooting the shit, brother.
All right. So the first one, this was an old question that I had from like 3 episodes ago. So is the barrier for entry in today's world too low? And as a result of that, is that why certain info is gatekept? So for example, usually back in the day, you would have, I guess, more masters. Think of trades like, electrician, welder, plumber, that sort of thing. You can't even be considered a master until you're 5 years into your discipline. And now with the expansion of the internet, and you can get information anywhere, it's kind of like anyone has access to anything, but they don't necessarily know the true road and journey it takes to get to that level of mastery. So, is the barrier for entry too low today? And that's why we're seeing a lot of difficulty in the job place, in the job market, as well as, certain birthrights of information are kind of kept hidden because given the wrong hand, it could be destructive.
I actually thought about this past week, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I do think the barriers to entry for a lot of things are getting lower. Too low. I may have an answer as I elaborate more on my previous thought. But for example, the music space, as I annoyingly always bring up, everyone can and wants to be a musician, right? In any facet, in any way, shape, or form, in any medium, any way they can get in the game, they want to do it. But I think because of how low the barrier is, all you need is a Focusrite and a mic and a garage. Not even, you need a phone and headphones because you can make your stuff in BandLab.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to just jump into it and get your feet wet. But because that barrier is so low, you have more people who are lacking the necessary skills or equipment or fundamentals, I should say. That's probably the most important thing, the fundamentals to actually progress and do things in a way that is above amateur. And I think in that sense, depending on what someone's doing that for, as I pivot into something else after this, it can be very discouraging. And something with a low barrier to entry allows for a lot of people to come in, like the gold rush.
Yeah.
If everyone can just grab a pickaxe and buy a train ticket to the west, to the west, and look for, a good place to start digging for gold, everyone can do it, but only a certain amount of people will find the gold, right? Um, it's kind of in that similar regard. Something with a higher barrier to entry. Maybe like in the same music space, being a CEO or a manager or an A&R or owning a studio. Those things take more time
Mm.
and require more skill. And I think we can pivot into the workplace now. Like, um, you can even see with jobs, any job that requires simply a high school diploma, those jobs are usually BS jobs, respectfully,
Mm.
as opposed to something that needs a college degree or higher. Those jobs usually have a higher ceiling as to where you can grow and where you can and leverage yourself from. But yeah, I think long answer to a short question. I think because the barriers to entry vary between different, I would say, professions, for lack of a better word. Um, yeah, I think it can discourage people, and it definitely allows for a lot of fallibility and human error in different spaces.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it allows for a lot of grifting too. You see this a lot on social media.
You've been
Oh,
using that word a lot, grifting.
yeah, change your career in 90 days, doing X, Y, and Z. You know, get into cybersecurity, get into this industry that is not even an entry level industry. There are outliers. Don't get me wrong. There are people who go from, I was a car porter to I'm a information security analyst at this company. So I went from making 35K a year to 90K in a singular jump. But they don't really go in depth on the actual training that they did, who they may have known at the company. Is the company willing to take more risks and like train you up from the bottom versus kind of having you hit the ground running, which most companies want you to have today? So yeah, I definitely agree that the barrier to entry for things is much lower. Even data analysis, not that data analysis is necessarily easy, but there's definitely scales and gradients of data analysis. Like, this person can use one tool, this person can use 10. You're both data analysts, but your skill set is just way different, and one is more competent than the other.
And as I think back on the question too, and as I reread it right here, on the info thing, I think when it comes to the information, stuff with lower barriers to entry, usually I think those the fields that have the most information gate kept,
Mm-hmm.
right? For example, like going back to the gold rush, if everyone knew exactly where to mine for gold, then everyone would just go to that place, and then it'd be a matter of who got there first.
Yeah.
But then you have, okay, whoever got there first, who had the best equipment to mine the most gold, et cetera, on and on and on. So, as opposed to, but now this is a caveat, right? Because with things that have a higher barrier to entry, let's say being like, I don't know, a hedge fund CEO,
Yeah.
right? Like, you have a very high earning potential, but it comes to a point where that will be your life, right? Like,
Mhm.
you will make that set of money. Let's say you make, I don't know how much do hedge fund managers make.
8 figures easily. Like salary is like 2-3 million.
You'll probably stay 8 figures for your entire career.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? As opposed to like Gold Rush, if you do your thing correctly, you can probably surpass 8 figures, 9 figures with a little bit of sweat equity and intelligence. But
Mhm.
then, they both have their drawbacks, because with the higher barrier to entry stuff, you have to work harder to get past that barrier, as opposed to low barrier stuff. You have to work incessantly at that thing you want to do if you want to be successful in it, or also just be jumping from low barrier entry stuff to low barrier entry stuff for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And then yeah, as I said before, the why certain info is gate kept. Not even just in that sphere. There's certain, yeah, like I said, birthrights that you have license to and that you should know about that just you're never taught about in school, or things of that nature. Laws of self-preservation and spiritual ideologies and knowledge and deeper profound stuff. But that's for another podcast episode. So the next episode is discipline and how it's actually the true key to freedom. So
Next question.
so shout out to Jordan Peterson, who I actually got this from. So in his scenario, he mentioned, in today's world, it's, do as thou wilt. That's the law. And, no one wants to have any discipline. Oh, you're impinging on my rights. I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. And everyone knows the other axiom, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so in his scenario, he used hunger. Yeah, you can eat whatever you want. But if you do, you run the risk of diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, all these other diseases and things of that nature. Whereas if you eat healthily, you'll have more longevity theoretically. Your body will be better in older age. You'll be able to move more, and all these other ailments that usually affect you in older age may not be as prevalent or around at all. And that is actually the true key to freedom. So in discipline, by depriving yourself of that, it's almost a way of delaying gratification, because you can continue uh enjoying yourself for a longer period of time versus taking all the upfront cash and then paying for it on the back end.
Facts, facts, facts. I like that one. So I got a little scenario question posit for you. So commutes. You sent me a Instagram reel or Twitter post about commutes affecting happiness, and that one rang so loud in my head because I know that the things I've found that bring me the most joy currently are the things that are just within arm's reach.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of exemplifies some stuff in the Bible, like all the things we had in the Garden of Eden were within arm's reach.
Hmm.
And as we got further and further away from the word, it became harder for us to find the necessary things that bring us joy and fulfillment.
Hmm.
I guess my question in that for you is how do you feel about your current commute? And do you think that your commute affects your happiness in any way outside of the work you're doing?
So I'm glad you asked me this question, because boy, do I have a story. So the last 4 years, due to a certain global pandemic, I was working remotely. And prior to 2020, remote work existed, but not into the scope that it does now. And it was kind of like a berserker when they first smell blood. Like, once I had that experience, I never wanted to go back into something else. So in my current position, I do commute. It's not bad. It's a 30-minute commute, so it's very doable. And in the clip, the guy mentioned that 30 minutes is like the peak happiness in terms of commute. Anything beyond 30 minutes is when it's diminishing returns for happiness. And I do think it does greatly make a difference, because it lengthens your day. If you have an hour commute each way, that's 2 more hours onto your day where you can't hang out with friends, see your kids, your partner, and do, your hobby. So it does make a difference. 30 minutes is doable because it's only 1 extra hour on both ends. And then if you commute an hour and a half or more, what is wrong with you? That's like my genuine question, because that's absurd. Um, and even in terms of, even if you made more, let's say you got a $20,000 pay raise to commute that extra half hour, that extra money that you would see, $20,000 is, I think, an extra 600 a month once you take taxes out. It's not really worth it, in terms of, I'm home and I'm at work, in a pretty quick fashion. And so working remotely, I understand maybe not everyone can do it. Maybe reserve it for the seniors, at a position, at a company that have 5 years experience, 10 years of experience. But the hybrid model is here to stay for the future. And I can't like tout enough how like much of a difference it makes in terms of like mental health. People get anxiety going into work. You got to put a face on. You got to be out in the world. Whereas if you're in the comfort of your home and you're still being productive, like it makes a huge toll. You can get more done. You can, you save money on food, because you're cooking at home and you can just get a little snack versus, oh, I forgot my lunch, or I'm still hungry and now I got to go out and buy something else. So, yeah, commutes definitely have a direct effect on happiness. Going from working remotely entirely to working in the office every single day was a huge jump. Whereas somebody working in the office every single day to working at home, for 95% of people, they'll be like, I can get used to this.
Yeah, I mean, my current commute, my my job is seasonal, so that's nice. I mean, that plays a huge role in my happiness at the job. But the commute on a bad day is like 50 minutes to there.
50.
50, yeah. That's with traffic, like 40 to 50 minutes. On a good day, coming home or going there with no traffic, it's like 25 minutes. So it kind of rounds out to being like an hour ish, hour 10 minutes commute, hour 20 at most. So I do see that titration of happiness as I uh, dread going to the job. But once I'm there, I know I'm gonna enjoy the work. I come home in 20 minutes and then bada bing, bada boom. But like I mentioned previously, just waking up and having the studio in my edifice is nice. And then, the commute to come do the podcast, the solo podcast episode with just you and I, it's like a 20-minute drive. So those things are very
Yeah,
seamless.
and I mean also with the podcast, I think you have more fun doing this than your day job. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more cerebral, a lot less taxing on the body.
yeah,
And it's within my area of expertise that I've devoted over a decade of my life to, which is audio. So
mhm,
it's nice. It's nice.
yeah.
I'll ask one more and then you can hop back in. But pause. But pontification, which seems to be what we're doing right now with this podcast, as we're 25, 26-ish episodes deep. From my understanding, just to define the word pontification, 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 just for the non-English speakers who listen to the podcast, who are learning the language. Shout out you guys. Pontification, from my understanding, is like riffing or speaking with an over exaggerated sense of importance. That's what I get from that. But you're the vernacular wizard. You can define it better before I ask a question.
Pontificate. Yeah, I mean it's like a soliloquy of thinking basically. It could come off as pretentious and um uh I know better than you sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you mean by pontification pandemic? Like everyone feels self-important.
Yeah, so that was what I put in the note. It seems like we have been, especially now more so. I would say we have been, but now more so
It's in the last 10 years.
with the advent of social media and everyone
I
trying to.
definitely agree because everyone has a voice now. And not that everyone shouldn't have a voice, but for most of history, everything worked in a hierarchy. And the only way you skip hierarchies is if you're deserving of it. And now with social media,
Mhm.
everyone's in the same pot. It's like a high school cafeteria.
Yeah,
You have the nerds talking crazy to the jocks because the nerds know they're not going to get punched in the mouth. Not that violence is, necessary, but the threat of violence changes people's attitudes. And that's been also something, we've dealt with throughout most of history. And you have people who they read one article and they think they're an expert now. I've seen people argue down legitimate doctors being like, no, this isn't true. Now, when it comes to naturopathic versus Western medicine, that makes sense. But you arguing this surgery technique with an actual surgeon, yeah, you're smoking. You know,
right.
so I do think everyone is a little self-important. They, think they know more than they do. And your outer world is a reflection of what you truly are, not your inner world and what you think of yourself. Because obviously, with a healthy ego, you should think you're the best. You should think you can do this. But at the end of the day, you can have the healthiest ego in the world. If you're 5'5", you're most likely not going to make the NBA. Like it is what it is. Um, you know, if you do make the NBA, then you'd be in the NBA. You know what I mean? So yeah, I do think we're reaching that point, and people are just creating problems out of nothing because we've been in so much peacetime. Not that I want a war, but just these are just cycles that happen throughout history. We've seen it happen with Rome, Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, whatever empire is going on. Hard times create strong men create peaceful times create weak men, and the cycle continues. So I think, yeah, we're in the and because the invention of technology, we don't have time to like focus on. We have so much time to just think and like take a step back and like self reflect. If you're working 12 hours in a field or in a coal mine or something, your body's broken down. You can't really think about anything. But now you have so much free time to just always be analyzing and overthinking and things like that. So yeah, I definitely do think it's I think Alan Watts talked about it too, like taking a step back from the game, like because you don't have to worry about survival stuff as much, you can kind of really reassess and be like, whoa, like, you know, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it, I wrote pontification pandemic because of alliteration, but I also think there are hmm, it seems like with the advent of, like I said, social media and just everyone chasing the whole content creation route, um, I think people are just lacking things to say of substance. And what I mean by that is, um, you mentioned it perfectly. People will read one article or look at one buzz topic and then pigeonhole in that buzz topic to appeal to the masses, as opposed to, like, I think like what we're doing. Like, we're just talk about things that interest us and within our quote unquote areas of expertise, but more so areas of interest, and just using that to see who we can benefit with our spoken word, as opposed to speaking as if we know everything about everything, and then having you think that our word is law, which
Yeah.
is not. I mean, I think it's I put it in my song enough, but it's a Buddhist philosophy. You just take what is useful, discard what is not. If something we say resonates, then use it. If something we say sounds completely outrageous, then just discard it or try it. Like Jordan Peterson said, Jordan Peterson, but I heard it from Peterson. He said, "Trust but verify."
Yeah. Or take the wheat with the chaff, or take spit out the bones from the meat. Pause.
Pause.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I definitely agree. I don't try and say I'm an expert on anything. I just kind of give my credentials, and then you can assess from there. And I always give my resources too. This is where I found perfect example. This question I got today from Jordan Peterson. You can go look for yourself versus, um, I'm not gatekeeping anything or saying my word is law. So
Yeah, and that's one thing. Before you ask your next question, that's one thing too. I think that's one good thing about school. They always ask you to cite your sources, and that's an issue we see in the comment sections of.
oh, you can Google it. That's the laziest intellectual like backing you can do is, oh, you can find it too.
Don't get me wrong. Like, if I'm talking to somebody in the street and they're like, "Yo, what does that mean?" I'm like, or like my girl's in the car and she's like, "What kind of car would you want?" I'm like, "Oh, I want a Rivian." Like, what's a Rivian? Then I was like,
Yeah, go
Google
look it
it.
up. Yeah.
I'm driving the car. I'm
Yeah.
like, Google it. But it's hard to explain. Like, it's it's a black. I want a black electric vehicle. It looks like who makes it? I don't know all that shit.
Yeah.
So Google it, because I'm not sure. I know the name of it. I know it looks cool. But if I'm talking about something like, you know, uh, like I just mentioned, the Buddhist philosophy, take what is useful, discard what is not. I couldn't cite what Buddhist text that's in, but I do recall it being Buddhist. And you can now
Just
I'm
type
gonna say,
up Buddhism with the quote and you'll probably
and if
find
I'm
it.
wrong, then I'll take that demerit. But I'm almost certain that I got that from a Buddhist philosophy. So
Yeah.
I digress.
Copy. All right, so next question is VR video, where are we heading? So I sent Kai a video earlier this week that I found on Twitter that was a video of a TikTok. So we already got a little bit of inception right there. But the video it's a VR headset and you're back in, I don't know, 1995 as a kid, and you're putting in Crash Bandicoot to either the PS1 or like a Dreamcast, like one of the older gaming consoles, and you're playing Crash Bandicoot in this VR. And it was funny because the comments were very split. One of the comments was like, "I'm not crying, you're crying," and I was like, "Yeah, like the nostalgia that's hitting right now is like crazy. Like I'm legitimately like in this scenario, of a part of my childhood, and it's it is a beautiful feeling. You can remember that time where you just didn't have problems, you didn't have to worry about bills, girls, all this other stuff, and it is truly beautiful. But at the same time, it's terrifying, in my opinion, because I think there's going to be an inflection point where people are not going to take these headsets off. The VR world is going to be too nice and pretty, and real life is gruesome and ugly, and there's a lot of not so nice things about the real world. And if you've watched Naruto, you remember the main antagonist, Madara Uchiha, one of the main antagonists, tried to cast basically a spell over the world, which would be like the VR world where everything is beautiful, everything is nice, there's no pain, but you're also taking away people's free will at the same time. And yeah, where do you think we're heading now that you've seen the video in terms of VR? I do think we are gonna get a Wall-E sort of world. Unfortunately, a lot sooner than I was hoping. And my only caveat with that is not that it exists, but in today's world, for example, we have cell phones. You can get by without a cell phone, but it's really difficult. Like you're gonna be missing out on a lot of opportunities, news, all this other stuff. I don't want a future where everyone has to have a headset to interact, and that's the baseline technology that everyone has to have, because that's not a life to me. So yeah, that's my question. Where do you think we're heading with the VR stuff?
Before I answer, I just asked Jamie, and Jamie told me that it was Bruce Lee, not Buddhism, but Bruce Lee had a Buddhist father. So
Mhm.
I guess that's where my mistake was. So I'm sorry, but yeah, I think the world is going into a place of like you said, the Wally state. Um, I I mentioned in an episode, I think we didn't release it yet. Um, but I mentioned Elon Musk's philosophy, the simulation philosophy, that technology will get to a point where it's indistinguishable from real life, and that VR game, it literally had the tweet. I think we could put the tweet in the episode bio
Yeah,
uh,
just
uh,
for reference.
just for reference, but everything around the actual Crash Bandicoot game looked VR. But when you watched him or her play that Crash Bandicoot game, it looked with the graphics of the original Crash Bandicoot,
Yeah,
So the game itself is indistinguishable from the original game. How you play it may be a little different, et cetera, et cetera. But my point being, um, you know, I'd like to give us the benefit of the doubt, and avoid playing devil's advocate. That it will probably be a point where we will know we're in a simulation. I mean, I think for our lifetimes, we'll know that we're choosing to wear a VR headset. Um, I think the issue arises when it becomes
so commonplace for the next generation where they just grew up with it and it's commonplace. Like for me, the first time I was ever on an airplane, I was like 3 months old, like legitimately. So I've been flying for a very long time. But even to this day, it blows my mind. Like we are flying. Like no one, like it's just taken for granted because I grew up with it. But think about in the 1970s, getting on a plane, I'd been so nerve wracked with how new the technology was and more prevalent for like, mechanical failure and all this other stuff. Shout out Mike for, dispelling, a lot of the flying anxieties that people have and things like that. But, you know, um, yeah, it's crazy. I don't fear for myself. I fear for those who are coming next.
Yeah, and I was talking to my videographer, shout out Jihad, about this whole VR technology and how seamless Apple VR is in terms of not really needing a controller like the Quest, and having it open up tabs in front of you and having it, attenuate screens based on where you're looking and all that nonsense. And that'll be dangerous because when I was younger, the iPad, when the iPad,
I bet it came out like 2010,
yeah, we were
12, 13 years old. Yeah.
we were in school. We were speaking the King's English
Yeah.
fluently at that point, And nowadays, you are having children in front of iPads
Yeah. It's a 24/7.
throwing temper tantrums when it's taken away. Like, man, I was tight.
We still grew up in a world of an analog world, I guess is the best way to put it.
I was tight when I couldn't play with an action figure for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But imagine but you get over it because, like you said, it's analog, so you could find other things to do.
Hmm.
When it's an iPad, there are certain things that are in that iPad that are exclusive to the iPad or the internet. And when you remove that from a stimulus or from a person, right, you have, I mean, not really FOMO, but just that lack of dopamine hitting the mind, and it kind of creates that lack, And I think that's where it comes from when the kid throws a temper tantrum from getting a toy taken away, etc. But the conversation between Jihad and I, when you have a kid now who puts that VR headset on, they can just be so immersed in that world, and you take that off from their head and in a forming mind. I mean, the
Yeah, they won't know the difference. I mean, our developed brains can't tell the difference between fact and fiction. Our dreams sometimes end up coming true, or our dreams feel so real. We're like, did that actually happen? You know what I mean?
facts,
So,
facts.
adding like a physical 3D object to create that reality. I mean, we already said they started returning Apple Vision Pros because like people's eyesight and neural wiring is now different because of it. And we just what do we always promote on the show? All this blue light stuff. So you're just siphoning blue light directly into like like your eye sockets and everything. Like there's nothing good that can come of it. You know, there are certain things that we've adapted to over time that are quote unquote unnatural. But they're a natural progression of things. This technology thing is not really that. And before we had the global pandemic, there was a lot of stuff on Facebook and other social media saying, down with technology, you know, it's getting too far, it's getting too advanced, you know, we're going to displace people from work with all this AI stuff. So, I mean, there's only so many ways you can skin a cat of us saying, like, just be careful. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but not a fan.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, the Apple Vision, as opposed to other VR apparatuses, it's the coolest one.
Yeah.
It definitely is the coolest one, and I could see myself using it. But give me the fifth generation,
Yeah.
so I'll wait.
After the kinks are out and
Yeah, and yeah, this just wait. I'll just wait.
yeah. So second to last, well, my last question. So I saw some news, did not verify, but I think it was I think it was just a tweet relating to an article or something from the CDC that the CDC is going to erase 64% of its website. Now, if you don't know what the CDC is, um, America is the alphabet capital of the world, or the acronym capital of the world. There's the CDC, FBI, CIA, who's he, what's it, you know. So the CDC is the Center for Disease Control, and they said they're going to erase 64% of their website. So as you know, they can change things. Things can be updated. They can maybe go against the original narrative that they had for something. And we see this with media on the internet. I mean, movies that don't get picked up by Netflix or Hulu, like, where do they go? They're just lost forever. So this is, I guess, more of a reminder of, you know, you know, information that could be changed later on, because you never know what original entity is going to renege, or they're going to change the definition later on. And getting back to physical media as much as possible, just because you have something verifiable. You know, my mom has like newspapers, like legitimate newspapers from like 2001 when 9/11 happened, and when Bill Clinton won the election in 2000 and stuff like that. So you have empirical, hard proof of this is what something used to be. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? On just in general, not that the CDC is erasing 64% of the website, but what does that bode for other entities that are the holders of information on certain topics?
So I think this seems to be something that has been persisting since the dawn of
The internet.
not the internet, just education,
Mhm.
and I would say education in the West with the intent to assimilate those who are not indigenously from the West. So it's like cleansing, right? And like I don't want to say ethnic cleansing, but I just said it. So it's like ethnic cleansing the internet, right? And it seems like because of how accessible information is now, as opposed to when we were coming up, everything was more or less analog. I mean, we didn't really get access to like really using social media as a form of communicating until like ninth, 10th grade. Before that, we had BBM and, you know, the Sidekick and stuff. But if you recall, that stuff was super slow. Like you weren't really doing much with that besides like BBM and AOL Messenger, right? But because we were getting most of our information from books, the only way to get information that was against a lot of the fallible information we're getting in school was from banned books. And if you weren't hip to banned books from it had to be from an elder because you were an infant, or one was an infant back then, or our generation were infants back then you were just getting your information from one source, as opposed to now how fast you can look up anything at the touch of a button. You can look through a lot of the guises that contemporary education tries to cast over most of us. So I think this is probably just another segue into the next iteration of that, where it's like, because we can't really pull the wool over people's eyes as we once could have. Now we're trying a different way. And this is in the realm of health, right?
Mm-hmm.
CDC is the realm of health. So,
and health is already a controversial, sort of endeavor, domain. So
yeah, and once you start disproving health facts, then the whole world goes to shambles. Shout out Trafalgar Law.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's like one prime example is cigarettes. Back during was it World War II? Was it World War One? One of the world wars. They were like, cigarettes are healthy for you. Wait. You're getting cancer and emphysema and you can't breathe anymore and I have to amputate stuff. No. Cigarettes are bad for you. Let's tax it now. And that's one thing. This is before the internet. This is before news spreads so fast. So I think now, yeah, like I said, this is just another way that they're trying to make sure they still have a foothold. They being the powers that be. Making sure that they have a foothold on what's being out there, so we don't have too many people who are going against the status quo. I don't even know how important going against the status quo is nowadays, because it seems like there's nothing really to rebel against. But yeah. I think
people are doing it themselves.
Yeah, I think the next rebellion is just inciting some more free thought and breaking free from just
and another pitfall you have to worry about too is not just the correct information. It's not like the information that goes against whatever the popular narrative is automatically correct. You have to double and triple check that too. So we're in the age of disinformation, which is shooing you away from truth or fact or whatever, and then there's misinformation, which is correcting information. So it's a lot, and you just have what makes this true and what makes this doesn't. That's a job in itself and everything. So you kind of have to always not be stuck to one thing unless you can prove it. So, for example, you can tell me the Grand Canyon is, it's not that grand. I can take your word for it, but I can't verify that until I go for myself. Now, extrapolate that to any scenario in the world, any fact you've been told in school, any fact that you've learned in a book from an author, unless they have supporting sources or something like that, then you can cross-reference, etc. But, just keep everything on a swivel. What does Ezio say? Everything is true, nothing is forbidden, something like that. So, yeah. And then your last question, my good sir.
Okay. So I was driving and there was a roadblock or a road was closed off.
Oh, second last question actually. Sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
A road was closed off and I was on Waze. And I was like, yo, why is Waze not rerouting me the right way? Like I was really like driving in circles and it was telling me to go back on the same closed road. And I was on Google Maps. And I was like, I guess I have no choice. I got to get home. So I go on Google Maps and it showed me the right way. And I was like, okay, thank you for having a second option, phone. But it's a simple question. And I'm not going to give you too much context as to why I'm asking this question. Maybe we'll bring it up after you elaborate some more. But why do you think Google Maps bought Waze?
Google's, a tech giant like anything else. Anything that, is a popular application, they want to get their piece of and, extrapolate it with the resources that they have. But what is Waze for? What do people normally use Waze for? It's to see, where are the police? Can I speed on this highway sort of thing? And Google buying Waze, Google has a lot of government contracts. So with Waze's technology, I have a feeling that Google is going to assist the government and law enforcement in cracking down on people who, want to avoid getting speeding tickets and all this other stuff. That's my I think that's my pretty straightforward answer. There's not anything else really to it.
Yeah, and I was thinking like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of these smaller entities that create um uh better platforms than existing platforms already, they don't stand a chance. Like,
Well, no, this is the thing. I don't blame Google. I blame the companies that are selling. Like, yeah, okay, your ways and you only clear, let's say, 100K a year, whereas Google buys you out for 100 million or something like that. Like that's money you'll never see again. You know, you want to take that deal, but at the same time, it's like ownership is everything. It's like everyone complains, no one knows anything. All these companies own all these businesses, but there's in a business deal, there's a buyer and a seller. That means someone is selling and just giving up all their resources, rights, and everything to these giant corporations. It's not the giant corporations are gonna obviously buy and expand. If you give up and don't even try and fight back, then I don't know what there is. Because what is Google? There's a Google Maps hitman, and they're gonna find the ways people like no, it's not something that big of a deal. It's just everyone wants money, and it's like okay, you have your 100 million now. Now what? What's next?
right,
You're
right,
gonna be
right,
on the beach and be bored after a week? Like congrats.
right. And then for this last question we have, hold on one second. Let me open the phone. Okay. So, in this X post you sent me yesterday, it said that black people don't have to go back to Africa. We can just move back to the South, right? So what are your thoughts on that statement? Because it makes a lot of sense because in rural areas of America, it's a lot cheaper to buy property and it's much slower pace of life at the expense of not having a deli in your corner. But yeah, it seems like a no-brainer because we always advocate for group economics and powernomics,
Geo
geo
arbitrage.
arbitrage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so me personally, shout out the Rastafari movement. But I was never one to be like we gotta all go back to Africa, right? I think Africa is more of the idea of that. Africa is more of a consciousness. It's more of a thought process of unification and being one with the people who look like you. Because the people who look like you, if you are all of the same thought process for the most part, then all of you guys have each other's best interest at heart. So I can definitely see where the whole idea of moving back to the South comes from. But let me hear your thought process on that.
Yeah, I mean, for the people of native indigenous ancestry in the Americas, a lot of their families are from the South. Everyone from Chicago's got a grandmother from Mississippi or Louisiana, and other things like that. So, I mean, this question I wanted to make a little bit more general because living in New York, I have friends from all over. So wherever you are, Greek, Chinese, Filipino, wherever, this can also apply to you as well. But yeah, I think that the tweet is pretty spot on. My qualm with living in a rural area is it's too slow. I visit my family in Texas, but they're still, in a near a major city. There's still stuff to do. But I mean, yeah, my pace of life changes when I go down there. I'm kind of going to bed around maybe midnight the latest because there's just not like really much to do as much as there is in New York. And yeah, I've always said, I mean, there's enclaves of group economics. We see it a lot in the Asian community, in the Jewish community. There's Black Wall Street. So yeah, I mean, having 100 people who work remote in some cost of places where the cost of living is their monthly bills are 10% total of their yearly salary. I think that's a good idea. And then yeah, you can incite the change that you want to see in the world. You can run for office. You have friends backing you. You have a checks and balances system as well. And then, you pass it down to the next generation and you attract more talent. And then you can make your own New York City where there's a limit cap. We're not going to raise the property value so much where it's unaffordable. You can control things a little bit more instead of having to rely on necessarily your local government that may not have your best interests at heart, or you're too far removed from them. You can go to all these town halls and voice your opinion, but they may not be answered or heard. So if you do it yourself and you have control over it yourself, and you have doing it with your friends or people that you know in person, I mean, there's nothing that's really going to beat that. So I'm a big proponent of that. If I decide to stay in the United States, I would probably be following this new meta. And sidebar, the another tweet that actually spurned the idea that I came across this tweet for was this guy I follow. He was saying, how many more TikTok videos and Instagram reels are you going to have to find of Gen Zers who are fresh out of college crying because they moved to a major city and they can only afford to eat and just go to work. They don't have a budget for anything because rent is too high, and they don't make enough to do any extracurricular activities. And they're, for lack of a better term, they're just wage slaves. They're just going to work, coming home, eating, and having no sort of variety or adventure or anything in their life. So, if you can't beat the game, which is earning enough where you can do that, then just move to someplace, where it's cheaper and you can do more. Sure, it's not going to be as fun. Sure, it's not going to be as this and the third, but I'd rather have a more boring life where I can travel on a whim versus, oh, I live in a major city, but I don't do things most of the time because I have to save up for a month to, go out with some friends. You know what I mean? So,
Well put, well put. And I think we can wrap up with that.
no, this is my this is the would you rather for the week.
Okay, go ahead.
Since we talked about it. A perfect life in your VR world, or your average in this scenario, real life, and why?
Uh, okay. Real life, yeah. Because Jim Carrey has a quote. I think I may have said it before. It's a good quote. So I've definitely told someone this quote before, which is why I'm thinking I've told it on the podcast before. But Jim Carrey said, I pray everyone gets everything they want so they can realize it's not enough. And I think a perfect life in VR is sounds cool for like a week, but like all the things I think I want now, like even in real life, like when I want a pair of shoes or something, or a piece of clothing, or something that's tangible that doesn't really accrue value. I buy it and then I'm like, have it now. Yeah, cool. Okay, it's there now. I can just do whatever I want with it whenever. As opposed to like the idea of getting dopamine hits. Like the challenge of overcoming boundaries and attaining the things I want in life through hard work and effort. Those things are a lot more valuable. I mean, but the same thing still applies, right? Because when I get that thing, it's like, okay, cool, I got it, it's done now. But the quest, the knowledge I gain on that quest to attain that thing and overcoming that challenge, that's the value you gain. That's the important thing, as opposed to like if I just buy something, like right now, it's just I work, trade my time for money, buy it, cool. Like nothing really impressive was done to do that. I just went to work and then got a paycheck and then bought it,
Yeah.
Or like getting a girl or something, It's just like, it's these things are just all. Shout out my girlfriend, by the way, but all these things are just fleeting, as opposed to gaining knowledge and wisdom. But
Yeah. As the Buddha says, when you have a desire, you have a problem.
and it's tough because we live in America and
We've
surrounded by
birth, we've been
desires.
just siphoned with dopamine and flashing lights, and you can have this and you can have that. But when the game is coming to an end, does that really matter? No.
And it's disguised as harmless things too. 'Cause I remember watching cartoons. It's just like I would have not wanted any of the things I wanted in life if I didn't see a commercial or someone else having it and it looked cool. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. And then also in that same breath, on that same question, if this whole life is already VR, it's just like I don't know. It's like having an action replay on the DS. I don't think if this is a game or a simulation and there's someone controlling my character, I think this is probably the beginning or, a little bit past the beginning of the game. And I think most avid gamers or most people who like to play games to completion are at a place where I'd rather beat the game with my own grit than just punch in a cheat code and just beat the game, because then after that it becomes boring.
Yeah, the action replay was cool. Shout out to action replay. Shout out my childhood.
Action replay, that was the greatest investment I ever made in my gaming career.
Yeah, shout out Pokemon. Shout out Emerald, my favorite.
Shout out EV training before it got easy. Shout out
shout out Lance. Shout out the Elite Four.
Shout out Cynthia.
Shout out Mudkip. Shout out Mudkip, my favorite starter.
Mudkip's my favorite starter. I like Turtwig. Turtwig was cool. I like Turtwig. Turtwig was cool.
Yeah. But also shout out to my co-host. Shout out to my parents, grandparents, loved ones, friends, gainful employment, heat, the sun, my beautiful mind, and my ability to critically think. And shout out humanity. I think we, in the innate sense, everyone has a good heart. You might get kicked off the horse from your own personal traumas that you deal with in your life, but at the end of the day, we want the best for everyone, and more right brain love and less logical and disassociated, heartless sort of thinking.
Shout out my loving mother. Shout out all my relatives, my family members, my lovely co-host. Shout out space and time. Probably the only things that are probably actually real in terms of everything on this planet. Shout out Westchester. A lot of good things coming out of Westchester right now. Shout out New York. We live in New York, so I gotta give it a shout out. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for me. I'm not gonna go too in depth and too corny today.
Alrighty, so we will see you guys next week, which is not going to be us. We have a special guest on, so stay tuned. But until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.
Peace.
Distancing myself from anything that seeming cynic. I evicted all my demons, I ain't seen them in a minute. Phone on D in the event they try and kick it. I ain't messing with a pessimist, I get that noise and flip it. Keeping up composure cause it's crucial. Tossing everything away unless that thing is useful. Pocket watching people, all these people getting used to it. Bumping blues and burning all my blues over my blue.